Welcome to part two of how to study smarter, harder, and longer. Let's face it, working hard is extremely valuable. In a world where the company that delivers for its customers better than anyone else generally wins, being able to do hard things in service of other people has a ton of value. I mentioned this last time, but just to reiterate, I'm not saying that you have to work hard to be successful. But it's worth noting how many successful people preach about working hard and its value. So there is definitely strong positive correlation between working hard and success in business. I also mentioned that I might not be the best at this, but I also haven't found a satisfactory explanation. So I'm going to give one to the best of my abilities. If you're better at this than I am, then please let me know how you think I can improve. I also mentioned that nobody ever taught me exactly what working hard was or how to do it. But a lot of people told me to do it, and not knowing what they meant exactly cost me a lot of time and many lost opportunities. I'm going to do my best today to save you from that. Having said all that, let's make a very important point before we begin. Working hard by itself may not make you successful. Plenty of people work hard their entire lives and never attain what anyone would call success. We definitely don't want that to be you. That's why we led off with working smart last time. Working smart, which we defined as doing the right thing at the right time in the right way, is much more important than working hard because by itself, working smart creates leverage. You accomplish more with less. But once you have leverage, the more force you can apply, the more of a result you can generate. That's what we're going to teach you how to do today. I do want to give a caveat that some of you work too hard. And if that's you, check out the Balance for High Performers episode linked below. When you know how to create balance, you can work extremely hard without damaging your health. Because health is generally the most important aspect of people having what they want, let's define working too hard as damaging your health. In my experience, all the hard work in the world won't pay off unless you have the physical capacity to enjoy the results. If you're not sure if you're damaging your health, please consult with a qualified health professional. None of this is medical, psychiatric, or professional advice of any kind. Let's begin. In order to make progress with this, we should define exactly what I mean by work. First things first, I believe that many people think working hard is applying effort while you work. And I disagree. I think that applying effort while you work is called working. If you're not applying effort while you work, I don't consider that working at all. I just consider that activity. Activity, meaning taking actions that may or may not move you toward your goals, definitely has its place. But let's not confuse that with doing work. Doing work means you're applying effort to a task. Just in case that's too vague, it means that you have a genuine intent to produce a quality result and that you are taking the steps needed to produce that high quality result to the best of your abilities, given the current conditions. That's work. Many people define work as an output, and that's actually really, really useful. But in my opinion, that ends up bundling working smart and working hard into one activity, which I think is confusing for a lot of people. So I'm going to define work as a set of inputs. Again, number one, the intent to produce a high quality result. Number two, performing the required actions to the best of your abilities. And number three, given the current conditions. To me, that's work. And in business, I believe that is the minimum acceptable definition of work. Anything below that is just activity, which means minimal or no effort, no intent to produce a high quality result, and or not executing the steps to the best of your ability. First things first, if that's you, that's okay for now and for the past. That's where I started. I thought I was doing work for years before I realized I was just active, meaning I was doing things, but they weren't necessarily producing results. They weren't moving me closer to my goals. And I'll admit, I was pretty embarrassed when I realized this, but I was just going on what other people had told me. So I can't be too mad at my younger self on that one. And I recommend you let the past be what it is as well and focus on becoming better in the present and the future, which I think are much more controllable than the past. The moment I actually started to do work is when I started getting the results that I wanted. And this took a lot of re-education and reconditioning, including changing my social circle at times, which probably was the hardest part of the whole situation. So I just want you to know that resisting work is completely human and completely natural, and that everybody experiences resistance. The key is not to delete resistance, but instead to improve at pushing through it. This might take some time to get good at. It took me a while to get good at it, but once you do get good at pushing through resistance, you'll start getting work done, which in my experience is the key to having what you really want in life. If you're really struggling and you want help with pushing through resistance, then I recommend listening to the How to Be More Disciplined episode that will also be linked below. You can also search this content feed for discipline or balance, depending on what you want help with. And that discipline episode should really get you to the baseline of what we're going to consider work for the purposes of this lesson. So I realize that I might be setting the bar rather high here, but I honestly think that's the right place to set the bar, especially when you're on this path of improving yourself and getting what for most of you will be a top MBA. Now that we've defined what work is, we can teach you how to work harder. First and foremost, working hard is working past the point that it feels good to work. Here, I think an exercise analogy usually works really well. Most of our physical growth happens in the last 20% of any particular exercise. In the first 80%, we're often just exhausting our reserves. And this is why it's called a hard workout when you're working out like this. It doesn't feel good in the moment because there's internal or external resistance to doing the additional work, the additional reps or sets in this case. That final 20% of the exercise where we're feeling tired because we've exhausted our reserves already is often the point of maximum resistance. And I mean that in the physical sense and the emotional and psychological sense. It's often the point where you're rationalizing giving up or telling yourself that it's a good idea to stop. But it's often also the point of maximum benefit. And if you want to look deeper into the science around this, I definitely encourage you to. But if you don't want to do that, that's pretty much how it works. I'm using some broad strokes here, but the basics of the analogy should hold. Now, that last 20% where you're getting the maximum benefit out of an exercise, that isn't always true of doing work. But it's a good analogy to understand the potentially counterintuitive connection between not feeling good in the moment and yet producing very, very good results. So again, it's just an analogy. It's not meant to be like a perfect depiction of what we're going to talk about with work, but that should hopefully help you understand, again, that counterintuitive connection between I'm not feeling good, yet I'm still doing the work, and that produces better results than I would have if I had just stopped when I got tired. Now, there are limits to this, and we'll talk about those limits in a second. I just want to create the right frame for us. Working easy, just to define this by contrast, usually means that it feels good. In general, humans tend to feel good when things require little or no effort, are really fun and interesting, boost our ego, like make us feel really good about ourselves, and are really new and different. There's a lot of variety. Humans tend to feel bad in the opposite situation. Things don't meet our expectations, aka they take longer than expected. They diminish our ego or our sense of self. They make us feel less powerful or diminish what we perceive to be our social status in any group. And people tend to feel bad when things are repetitive and boring. So the opposite of all the things I said that tend to make us feel good. Obviously, again, using some very broad strokes here, but I think as we go through the lesson, you'll understand why I'm painting the picture this way. Now, hopefully, your GMAT prep will be only what I just mentioned, faster and easier than you expected, really fun all of the time, constantly new and stimulating, and makes you feel really good about yourself. Everything I'm sharing with you in this content is designed to produce that result to the maximum extent possible. But there is at least a chance that it will not be any of those things. And even if it is, what are the odds that you reaching all your most coveted goals will feel that way? I'm not here to answer that for you. Honestly, you can answer that for yourself. I'm here to help you just in case it's not all fun and games. And knowing what hard feels like will help you get results even when things get difficult. So, to help you start to recognize what hard feels like, look for things that, number one, don't meet your expectations, which means they take longer than you want them to or longer than you expected them to. Two, look for things that diminish your ego, which means they make you feel like you're not in control of your destiny or you're not the highest status member of whatever social group you value. And look for things that are repetitive and boring, which means they aren't constantly new and stimulating. You're doing the same thing over and over and over again with no variety. It's worth mentioning novelty, just meaning things that are new, produces a lot of feel-good chemicals like dopamine, which is partially why going to a new restaurant or getting that brand new car or that brand new computer or smartphone feels fun and exciting. The opposite of this causes those feel-good chemicals to go away. That's why hard work is often called hard. It doesn't feel easy, empowering, or new. Chemically, you might even be able to feel all those happy chemicals dissipating when you do things that don't meet your expectations, that diminish your ego, and that are repetitive and boring. Okay, I can certainly feel that when the going gets tough. Now, obviously, there are times when we want things to be easy, boost our ego, and be new and exciting. That is just so painfully obvious that we want life to feel like that. Hopefully, most, if not the majority or all of the time, maybe. Weirdly, though, creating those experiences often requires experiencing the exact opposite for a little bit. Again, think about how you feel during the workout versus how you feel after the workout. That can be a good analogy for what I'm describing here. So to clarify, working hard is working, one, longer than you expected to, two, to an extent that might make you feel weak or low status or incapable or like you're not capable of making your dreams come true. And three, doing the same thing over and over again, even when it's not fresh, new, or exhilarating anymore. That's hard work. Okay, work is applying effort to the intended task. I already defined that. Working hard is usually these three things that tend to make us feel bad as human beings. When I say working hard, that's what I mean. I don't mean that you work until you got tired. Everyone gets tired, whether they're working or not. People even get tired on vacation. If you simply work until you're tired, that's usually an average level of effort. And that's what most people do. They work until they're tired and then they stop. Working hard means you continue to work past the point that it feels good to work anymore. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with stopping when you're tired, and I'm not here to shame anybody. It's all about what you want out of your life. I am here to say that stopping when you're tired is definitely not going to help you work harder. That's the purpose of this episode. If you don't want to work harder, if you feel that you are working hard enough or you're working too hard, maybe this just is not the episode for you. But if you want to know how to work harder, just in case things get difficult, and you want the skill of producing results when things get difficult, then I think working harder is a valuable skill to have. And if you want to learn how to do that, learn to keep working after you've already gotten tired. That's what I'm going to help you improve at today. Now, many of you naturally enjoy working hard, and many of you have conditioned yourself to enjoy working hard because you've seen the benefits. That's great. You can definitely learn to love this. But I want you to know that you don't have to love it. You just have to know how to do it, because doing it is all that matters in terms of producing the results that we want to see. So now that you know how I'm defining working hard, how can you actually improve at doing it? First, you intentionally do things that take longer than expected. There are many, many ways to practice this and to build up your endurance, but one effective way that's really, really simple is by doing more physical exercise. So what I recommend here is go to the point when you get tired where you would normally stop. And then, very importantly, as long as you're not in danger of injuring yourself, do about 10% more than what you just did. If you got tired at 10 sets, do 11 sets. Again, as long as you're not at risk of injuring yourself. If you're at risk of injuring yourself, that's not worth it. You should stop and come back another day when you're ready to push yourself a little bit more. Extending this example, if you normally stop at 3 miles because you feel like you're too tired, push yourself to see if you can do 3.3 miles. Again, avoid injuries at all costs, but when you can do 10% more, do 10% more than you normally would, or at least 10% more than when you get tired and normally would tell yourself to stop. This is a healthy, normal way of pushing the boundary a little bit at a time. It's usually not a good idea to try to double or triple your capacity overnight. That's often counterproductive, and I talk about that in the discipline episode. So if that's you and you have trouble stopping yourself from overextending yourself, like you're an all or nothing type person, and this sort of like gradual incremental improvement thing over time is tough for you, strongly recommend listen to that How to Be More Disciplined episode. That should really, really help you out. But if you have more questions about your specific situation, feel free to touch base with us anytime. We're at the GMAT Strategy on current social channels, or you can email us at contact, CONTACT, at thegmatstrategy.com. Working longer than expected is a skill you may not be good at first. I wasn't. I was terrible at this. Embarrassingly terrible. But like so many things, you will definitely get better over time if you practice. And that's how I've gotten better over time. And that's how I'm still getting better to this very moment. Perhaps obviously, you can apply this 10% technique to many, many different things. If you normally feel quote unquote over it after preparing a meeting for an hour, challenge yourself to prepare for an hour and 5 minutes. If you would normally stop working on a project after 10 hours due to fatigue, or you're just done with the project, feel like you can't look at it anymore, see what you can accomplish with an additional hour. The point is to go beyond expectations on a regular basis. Most people feel resistance to that. Learning to handle that resistance is how you get stronger. Because if you have the skill of moving beyond expectations, you should be able to work harder than you were able to work yesterday. If you continue to practice, completing tasks that take longer than expected will be a skill that you can deploy whenever you want to. That skill can make you extremely effective at producing results in difficult situations. And producing results in difficult situations is super, super valuable on many, many, many fronts. You want to make more impact. You want to make more income. You want to have more satisfaction, more fulfillment. You want to give more. All of this stuff will help you with that. So that's thing number one you can do to improve at working harder. Intentionally do things that take longer than expected. Second thing you can do to improve your ability to work hard. Intentionally do things that hurt your ego a little bit or make you feel a little lower status than you might be comfortable feeling. Just like working out, you want to avoid serious injury at all costs. It is not worth overextending yourself here. So if you're going to try this, start with a mild discomfort. That's how it should feel, rather than something that's going to be like so embarrassing you're going to struggle to recover. Don't do that. That's not wise. And that's not what I'm recommending either. Again, none of this is medical or psychiatric advice, so engage at your own risk, and please seek professional help if needed. If you're struggling, get professional help. I'm just sharing my opinion, which has definitely worked for me and has worked for thousands of my clients at this point. To be specific, here's what I recommend. Practice networking with people who are a lot harder working, more successful, and more accomplished than you are. This has many, many positive effects, but one of those positive effects is that you will get more comfortable spending time in environments that might not boost your ego. They might even hurt your pride a little bit. And you might start thinking, maybe you're not accomplishing enough. Maybe you're not earning enough. Maybe you're not helping the people around you enough, and on and on and on and on. That's acceptable as long as you're not at risk of injuring yourself or like embarrassing yourself to the extent that it's like irrecoverable, or you need like, many hours of professional help to recover. That's not what I'm talking about here, okay? We're just going a little tiny bit outside the comfort zone. Now, eventually you'll realize, like I did, or I believe that you'll realize, that feeling this way is really not that big of a deal. In fact, pretty much everybody expects that you aren't going to be great at things that you haven't put a lot of time and energy into already. And people who are true masters understand the extent of time and energy that's involved in mastery. So even if you've put a tremendous amount of time and energy into something and you're still not quite where you want to be, that does not mean you're not going to get there. What's true of these situations is if you keep putting in time and energy, you can have most, if not all, the things that you really, really want. But you have to start somewhere. And the vast majority of us do not start at the top of our field, not even close, or for at the top of any field for that matter. And if you don't actively practice being okay with this part of potentially hard things, you'll probably be less skilled at handling situations that don't make you feel good about yourself. Maybe they diminish your sense of pride. You're embarrassed to yourself in the practice room. "Ah, I can't believe I got that problem wrong again." Those kinds of things happen all the time when you're studying for the exam. And for sure, being around super successful people, however you define success, by the way, it could be people who have a bigger impact on society, if that's your thing. It could be people who just like have deeper, better relationships, like whatever. It could be defining success however you want to. And being around people like that, it's not the only way to get more comfortable with this, okay? There's plenty of different ways that you can engage with this thing that like maybe hurts your pride just a touch, just to get used to that feeling and realize like it's okay. You're gonna make it if you keep applying effort. Everything gets better. It's just a way, this whole like getting around people who are more successful than you are, however you define that. It's just a way that I've found that this is like useful, that you can build this skill over time, and it's kind of fun. And a lot of times you learn super, super valuable things by hanging out with these people, like big mindset shifts that can help take you to the next level in whatever arena that you want to level up in. Okay, it's something I've made extensive use of and still use it to this very moment. So, two things so far that we've talked about that can help you work harder. Number one, intentionally doing things that take longer than expected. Number two, intentionally putting yourself in situations where you maybe don't feel the best about yourself. Those are things that people usually don't feel good about. And if you can handle those bad feelings, you'll be able to work past the point where it feels good to work. Third and final thing that you can do to improve your work ethic and improve your ability to work hard is intentionally doing things that are repetitive and boring. One of the best ways that I've found to practice this is by rereading the same book 10 times in a row. When you're hating it, you know it's working. And I don't necessarily mean your favorite book. I mean like a nonfiction book that you're reading simply for the technical skill of it, not necessarily even the joy of reading itself. Okay, because I don't want you to ruin reading your favorite book by reading it 10 times back to back. And also it might be a little bit too enjoyable to like push you out of your comfort zone, if that makes sense. But pick a skill that you really want to master, get the best book that you can in that, and read it 10 times in a row. When you finish it the first time, start again at the beginning. When you finish it the second time, start again at the beginning. When you finish it the third time, start again at the beginning, okay? Now, rereading books like this has also many, many, many side benefits. But it also has the potential benefit of being fairly unpleasant at times. And many, many people resist doing things that are repetitive and exactly the same over and over and over again. So, some interesting research on this shows that when we do tasks that initially seem unpleasant, that we feel emotional or maybe even physical resistance to doing, we actually grow the part of our brain that allows us to sustain unpleasant tasks. Super, super interesting research if you want to look into this. Again, obviously, there are limits to this, and definitely consult a professional psychologist or doctor if you're struggling emotionally or physically. Having said that, intentionally doing things that are repetitive and boring in the right quantities is like a workout for your brain. You don't have to love it, like I said, but you will definitely benefit from having the skill of continuing to work on something long after it's new and interesting. Many tasks that make great businesses great are repetitive and potentially boring. If you have the skill of handling that gracefully, you'll be able to produce great results when things get challenging, which again is super, super valuable. Now, perhaps obviously, studying for the GMAT when you don't feel like it and when the conditions are not ideal also helps you build this tolerance. It's excellent practice for all of these things that I just mentioned. But I have found that the above things that I just talked to you through, the recommended exercises, are simpler and the stakes are much, much lower. So I like to recommend these things for people who are just starting to build up their work ethic or who have a really strong ethic but are looking to push themselves to the next level. A lot of times it's the simplest exercises done with the proper intent and with the proper number of repetitions that really produce the maximum benefit that you're looking for. Now, if you feel that you really lack work ethic, do all the above and see what helps you the most. Eventually, that should map really, really well to your GMAT studying as well, especially if you feel like you struggle to push yourself during your GMAT studies. Now, if you're already an expert in all of the above, then consider some things that you've been resisting doing. And consider leaning into doing those things on a regular basis to stretch your comfort zone and grow your work ethic as well. You don't have to use the practices I just talked about. You can just internally reflect what's that thing that you've been putting off, that conversation that you've been putting off, that deal that you've been putting off, that project you've been putting off. You don't have to set aside 5 hours a day to engage with that stuff. Even 10, 15 minutes a day can take you far. And I've had tons of success with that, even as my work ethic has grown over the years. Let's summarize. Working hard is working during times you don't feel like working. This definitely and especially includes working when you promised yourself that you would, even though you might be tired, not feeling confident that you can achieve your goals, or would rather be doing something else that feels better or is new and exciting. Working during those times usually doesn't feel good in the moment, and we talked about why, but that doesn't mean it's not the right time to work. And the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. As we wrap up, it's probably worth mentioning that there is a positive feedback loop between the skill of working hard and the skill of working smart. Because once you identify what the biggest opportunity is when you're working smart, again, I taught you how to figure out what is the right thing to be focusing on at the right time in the right way last time. Once you figure out what that right thing is, in order to focus on it, you usually need to stop working on other things that you might want to work on, even though they're not the smartest use of your time. Most people find that hard to do because it doesn't feel good to ignore stuff that you want to focus on, that you're emotionally compelled to work on, in order to focus on something boring, repetitive, or that makes you feel like you're not great at it. Having said all that, if you want to go to one of the best business schools in the world and become more valuable as a contributor in your field, I strongly recommend building the skill of being able to work on these things, and have now hopefully given you some great ways you can practice that skill and improve at it. That's how you work harder. It is not rocket science, but it's also not easy by definition to do. If you improve the skill of doing things even when you don't feel like doing them, by intentionally doing things that you have a natural resistance to, you will probably become a more valuable contributor to the teams that you want to contribute to. If you have questions about any of this, feel free to touch base with us anytime. Again, we're at the GMAT Strategy on current social channels, or just shoot us an email, contact@thegmatstrategy.com. As always, my greatest hope is that this material will make your studies as easy and as painless as they can possibly be. If you want more tips and strategies for optimizing your performance on the GMAT, please head to our website, thegmatstrategy.com, which is linked in the description of this content, and check out our free video on how you can reach your dream GMAT score in half the normal time. In the meantime, this is a regular show, so please subscribe and please stay positive and stay consistent with your studies. Talk to you all soon.